Hi, everyone. This is Gabby from mythesiscoach.com. And today I want to share a really important tip. Well, it's something that I'm sure all of us who are working on a thesis have thought about at some point. And that is, how do we get back to our theses after we have been on a break for some time? Now, like I said, we've all had this. I mean, sometimes that break is something that we wanted, like a holiday, wanted and needed. Like we take a holiday, it could be a week off, could be 2 weeks off, just some time to replenish our brains and sort of get some good, clear thinking going on again, focus our minds on something else. So sometimes it's that. But, other times life just gets in the way. You're busy thesis writers. I know that. For most of us, the thesis isn't the only thing we're doing. So work might be crazy. You might have just lost track of things. You might be down on motivation. Perhaps in this time of COVID, it might have been an illness, someone you had to care about. Things get in the way and break our momentum when it comes to writing our theses. So the question is, if this happens to you and you've now decided to get back into your thesis, what can you do? And I want to share 4 steps with you that will hopefully get you back into that piece of work which you're doing. My first tip is take stock. This is a really important part of the process and it totally counts as work. What this means is that you sit down and you look and you say, okay, what have I done? What have I already got? This is a point where you go through your files on your computer, you look at what you've been writing, maybe you go back and scroll through some correspondence from your supervisor. But the idea is to really look and see, what have I done already? So that's number one, is take stock. Number two, then, is to create a plan about what's coming next. Now, I don't know if you're like me, but there is nothing worse for me than sitting down at the computer, knowing I have to do writing, knowing that I'm doing academic writing, but I don't actually know what I'm doing. And when that's the case, then I end up spending half the time just flicking through my computer and faffing and all of that. So once you've taken stock, which was step number one, you can then really sit down and create a plan going forward. I'll talk more about plans in a later video, but for me, it's about looking at, okay, when do you want to, what's your next milestone? What do you want to submit? So that's your big milestone. Maybe it's a chapter, maybe it's a full thesis. That's your milestone. And then working backwards in terms of what needs to happen in order to reach that milestone and setting that out according to a timetable. So, how long are things going to happen? Map it out for yourself. It's flexible, things always change. I know that. But the idea is that you then have a working plan so that the time where you do spend getting back into the project, you can jump in and hit the ground running. But my advice is to don't just say like big things like finished chapter. Break that down. What does it actually entail? Are you going to need to find 10 articles? Then write that. Are you going to need to read those 10 articles? How long does an article take for you to read? How can you break that up into smaller chunks? Do you need to write a chapter? If so, maybe you want to set up the template. That is a step. Write that down as a step. So it's taking the big thing, big task or milestone you want to reach, giving it a date, working out what you need to do to get there. Often these are going to be really small tasks to complete that big milestone, and then setting those out according to a timetable, which is flexible and always likely to change. Step number 3 is, once you've done that, then pick a couple of small wins from your list. Now, that might be something like create the template with all the correct indentations for writing that chapter, which heading goes where and how you're going to organize that. That is a small win. Tick that off. Or it might be download 10 relevant papers and file them according to theme. That is a step, and it's a small win. That's something that you can do quite easily. Or it might be, email your supervisor and tell them you're alive. That is a small win. You can do that quite easily. So find a couple of those small wins, maybe 3, maybe 4, and just get those ticked off. And you'll find that momentum starts to propel you and gives you the energy to move forward. And then my next tip is to, step number 4 is, on that list of things you still want to do, find something that excites you. So what is something that you think, oh, that might actually be quite cool? I had a client I was working with recently who I suggested he did that. And he said, yeah, well, I was actually quite excited to compare the different models for this experiment I'm doing. And I was like, yes, take that then. And he said it really helped because it meant he didn't like loathe the idea of sitting down and carrying on working. And the act of doing that starts a habit. Well, because it's not so terrible, you don't mind doing it. So you do it again and you do it again, and then it becomes a habit. And then you kind of pick up the sort of intellectual resilience, I suppose I could call it, to come back again and work with the stuff that's not so good. The last thing that I want to leave you with is when you have taken a break and you are then coming back to the thesis, it is very possible to kind of beat yourself up about it, to say, oh, well, I haven't been doing this. I can't believe I let it slide. I know for myself, when I was working on my PhD, there was a lot of this kind of emotional, mental berating of myself. I want to say to you, when you come back to your thesis, feel good about what you're doing. A lot of people wouldn't come back. It's a hard journey. A lot of people would just give up, but you have actually come back to it and you are giving it another go and you're throwing your hat in the ring. What do people do? You're doing that thing, you're showing up and you are taking on this task and going with it. So I want to congratulate you for that. I hope those 4 tips, taking stock, creating a plan, ticking off a couple of small wins, and then tackling something that you find kind of interesting. I hope those 4 steps really aid you as you come back to your thesis after a break. This is Gabby from mythesiscoach.com. You can find out more about me at my website, www.mythesiscoach.com. Join my Facebook group, connect with me over LinkedIn, and I look forward to sharing more tips on as we go along this thesis journey together.